You ever feel like a game is almost purposely targeted to you? Well, that's the way I felt with, yeah, you want those games, right? So here you go. Now, let's see you clear them. Now, if you're familiar with mobile game ads, this game immediately seems obvious to you. So many times you'll see a mobile game advert, and the game is either not as good as it looks in the advert, or is just straight up an entirely different game. Like in the case of like that Ebony game where, you know, that one which is that one where you pull like the little rods to get the person to the treasure, but there'll be like lava and, you know, monsters and whatnot. And it never looked, and I've played that game. In fact, I'm doing a video as we speak where I play different mobile games just to see if there are any mobile games that I actually enjoy, and it's nowhere near as good as the advert. You'll have to stay tuned for that. But here in this one, these are exactly like you would expect them to be. Stick figures and all. There are 5 mini-games: Pin Pull, Number Tower, Parking Lot, Cash Run, and Color Lab. And there's not a whole lot to say really. With Pin Pull, you want to make sure the person gets to the treasure like you see in all those different adverts. In Number Tower, you've got to be able to defeat all of the towers, which just requires a lot of math calculation. Parking Lot involves you trying to get all the cars out, which is something that I see less ads for than some of the others, but is still a thing. Then you have Cash Run, which is a 3D runner game where you've got to use your stacks of fat cash to climb over these traffic cones and other obstacles. And then you've got Color Lab, which is another one that I see less adverts of nowadays, but you have to just get all of the right color fluid into the test tubes. All of the games are simple, but they are fun to play, honestly. The levels start off incredibly simple, so even if you don't understand the mechanic right away, you quickly get the idea. The only one that I did have trouble with was the 3D game, the water runner, just because with the slightly skewed angle, and I think my depth perception is slightly off, I did struggle sometimes to properly judge, when to go up and down. But apart from that, the game's up quite fun. The game's charm is only amplified because unlocking levels is done through IQ, another thing that mobile game ads love to use. Like, you'll see mobile game adverts where players will make wrong moves, and you'll see this little IQ score keep ticking down, and it's so stupid. But to see this game just openly making fun of that is brilliant. There's so many things that I love about this game. It's so simple, and there's also so many levels. So for as simple a concept as it is, there's enough here to chew on for a good long while, making it definitely worth its money in my opinion. The levels do feel a little bit restrictive towards the end, like this isn't like Portal, for instance, where, there is a clear, defined way of doing things, but, it's open-ended enough that you can try and go about it at your own pace. This game feels like it has very specific solutions that you cannot deviate from, which obviously does become a bit of an issue towards the end, especially as some of the levels, especially in like the parking lot, can get quite long. I mean, to spend so much time on a longer level only to make like one mistake, aka just deviate slightly from what they had intended you to do, it can get frustrating at times, as you then have to do the entire level over again. But it's not so frustrating to completely ruin the experience. Still, I'd recommend checking it out because even with that all in mind, it's still fun and charming enough that I like checking it out. It's probably one of the better cases we'll get to see of some of these different game types, and I'd honestly love to see this game maybe even get some DLC or an update to add even more game types. You see all kinds of stuff in mobile game adverts, so the possibilities really are endless for Monkeycraft, the developers, to continue to expand on this if they so chose. Overall, the game isn't anything groundbreaking by any means, but if you've really been wanting to play those games that you've been seeing in those mobile game adverts, it scratches that particular itch in my opinion. And really, that's all I ask of it. You can check it out on Steam, and I imagine other game platforms too. Dragon Drop, a game that has art by a good friend of mine, Green. The idea of the game is quite simple. Basically, you and up to 3 other players get together, and with your fire blast, you knock down blocks in an arena and try to send your opponents to their doom. Similar games that I can think of are stuff like Bomberman, where you have to blow your opponents up, or the Monkey Fight minigame in Super Monkey Ball, where you have to punch your opponents off of a platform. I've heard there's like a similar game that, might have been an inspiration for this from Kirby, but I don't know that for certain. It's honestly a fun little time though. with how many different varieties of dragons you can have, as well as all the little, hats and whatnot you can pop on your dragon, as well as the fact that there are like 7 different game modes, they're clearly trying to take this idea and get as much mileage as they can out of it. You've got your typical stock and timed, where stock is going to be you with a limited amount of lives, and timed is going to be, just keep on going until you run out of time and see who did the best. There's a Dragon Dash mode, which honestly I think is probably the least interesting, because it's mainly about how fast you can walk. You still try to attack each other, and if you fall, you end up losing points and whatnot. But I'd definitely say that's the least interesting game mode. Then you've got Quick Draw, where you only get 1 life, which is pretty wild, honestly. And it's just a good, quick way of making a tense fight. Then you have Speed Stock, where all of your characters are super fast, and that might be my favourite one personally, just because I just find it fun to watch the dragons all go crazy. It's so frenetic that you kind of get lost sometimes. There's Stage Destruction, where your points are actually primarily from destroying the stage, and not actually from knocking your opponents off. In fact, in that one, if you fall off, or you cause one of your opponents to fall off, you end up losing points. And while that seems counterintuitive, it does lead to a little bit of an interesting dynamic. Now you've got to be careful to get as much carnage as possible without causing yourself or anyone else to get caught up in it. Because then a third person might end up catching up to you and overtaking you, which I think that's actually kind of interesting, and I can't believe, I've never seen something like that before. Then they have Updrop, which is an interesting take. Instead of the blocks falling downwards, they actually go upwards. This means that sometimes the blocks get in your way because you can't see your dragon anymore. They cause your dragon to go upwards, so now you can't see them anymore, you have to quickly get down. And of course, the main concept of falling into the gaps. You got to avoid falling to your doom. The only problem with it is that because of the fact that you're going upwards, there's a lot of wiggle room, so these tend to go on a little bit longer for my liking, because it's so much easier to save yourself from certain doom in those scenarios. But it's not the end of the world, and it's still a fairly fun game mode. Even with all that being said, I still think they could technically take it further. If you had the ability to add items into the gameplay mode, like say you got one which allowed you to blast one that let you go take out 3 rows at once, or even just 2 rows at once, that would be huge. Like, that could be really interesting. So I think there's still more they can do with this, and given the game is still in early access, I think there's a lot more that they are planning to do with it. In fact, in the loading screen when you start up the game, it shows you some of the planned features they have for the game, including a creative mode, live stream integration, special events, and even a story mode, which I definitely want to revisit when the time comes. This is overall a simple idea being brought to its limits, which I really find endearing, and of course with the art style where all the dragons look like little chubby beans is honestly really cute as well. Also, the soundtrack, as you can hear in the background, is pretty darn good in my opinion. It's really nice. My only problem is that some of the menus seem to be a little laggy? Not critically so, but I can tell that in some menus, the menu is actually a little less smooth than the actual gameplay, which is just kind of strange, but it's not a major problem. Overall, I just think it's a fun game, and I can't wait to see more updates to this, and I'll probably cover it again next year after it's had a bunch more updates done to it. But even now, I definitely recommend checking it out. You can find it on Steam for £4, I believe it's also on itch.io, and yeah, once again, highly recommend it. Sonic Generations is like a comfort food for me. No matter how many times I play this game, I always walk away with a smile on my face. The story itself is probably one of the weaker parts of the game, because it's just a foil for the game to follow. Eggman, he's messing with time or whatnot, who cares? Let's get on with the actual good parts. And let me tell you, there's a lot of good parts to this game in my opinion. There are multiple levels throughout Sonic's history in this game. You've got Green Hill Zone in Sonic 1, Chemical Plant Zone in Sonic 2, Sky Sanctuary in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Speed Highway in Sonic Adventure, City Escape from Sonic Adventure 2, Seaside Hill from Sonic Heroes, Crisis City from Sonic 06, Rooftop Run in Sonic Unleashed, and Planet Wisp from Sonic Colors. Not to mention that, there's also the boss stages such as the Death Egg Robot from Sonic 2, Metal Sonic from Sonic CD, Perfect Chaos from Sonic Adventure, Shadow the Hedgehog from Sonic Adventure 2, Silver the Hedgehog from Sonic 06, and the Egg Dragoon from Sonic Unleashed. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention as well, on top of all of these amazing levels, there's of course these little side missions which they have you play, and you don't have to play all of them, and honestly your mileage may vary on how much you enjoy some of them. Some of them are really quite fun and others are really a tedious trek, but because they're all largely optional, you do have to play like a few, but you get to pick which ones. And of course, if you do enjoy the game, then it gives you even more to play. One other bonus thing though, only on the console versions if memory serves correct. It's on the 360, I don't remember if it's on the PS3 version, but it's definitely not on the PC version, was a fully playable version of Sonic 1. And unfortunately, it seems that at some point I started my Xbox 360 save over again, so I don't even have the Mega Drive version unlocked. But yeah, that was a nice little bonus given it was an anniversary game, and it's strange to see them take it out. It really does have a wide range of different levels throughout Sonic's history, as this was an anniversary game when it first came out. Not to mention the several references that are made throughout the game. It feels like a genuine love letter to the series, good and bad. As much as people may dunk on the way classic Sonic was incorporated into a game like Sonic Forces, which will include me, we'll get into that eventually, this is where it all made a whole lot of sense. Because as you're playing through the game, one Sonic will have you reminiscing about the good old times that you enjoyed when you first played those original games, and then the other Sonic will have you experiencing those levels in a whole new light. Now you might have noticed that I didn't say which Sonic in particular, and that's because it changes as the game goes on. In the early stages, of course, you'll be enjoying getting to experience Green Hill Zone, Chemical Plant Zone, Sky Sanctuary in HD with classic Sonic. He doesn't control one-to-one, which I know will definitely ruffle some feathers, but he controls fine enough in my opinion, and getting to experience these levels remastered and remixed in their own special way was just something that I really enjoyed at the time. And then of course once you switch over to modern Sonic, it takes a whole new life as you get to experience these levels like they've never been seen before. Getting to witness Green Hill Zone and Chemical Plant Zone in particular were huge in my opinion. I absolutely adored getting to see these sights like I could only picture when I was little. Then of course as it starts taking form into the more modern Sonic games, you get to see the likes of City Escape and Rooftop Run from classic Sonic's perspective, as it ends up being this whole new thing, as now you gotta run from the truck in 2D, and I just love the creativeness of this whole venture. And of course, blasting through it as modern Sonic is so much fun. They're personally my favourite levels, the modern Sonic ones, because when you have everything together, blasting through them in just a couple minutes is so much fun. The weakest levels, in my opinion, I thought were going to be the Crisis City ones, because they absolutely do whatever they can to really throw you off in those levels, but I feel the Planet Wisp ones are my least favourite because they tend to drag just a little bit longer than I'd like. But overall, each of these levels is an absolute treat. And then there's the boss fights, which are a weaker part of the game. Not terrible, as oftentimes the spectacle of seeing the Death Egg Robot, or Perfect Chaos, or the Egg Dragoon make up for it in certain ways, but oftentimes these bosses are way too easy. I feel like the hard mode that you unlock after beating the boss should have been the default personally. Though that might also be because I've beaten the game so many times, like, it probably stands to reason why I would be just destroying the game. The Time Eater part is definitely the weakest boss fight of all. It drags on for just too long, and it's just not that fun. That's definitely a weak ending to an otherwise exceptional game, because even in its weaker moments, this game can be a lot of fun. In fact, while getting footage from this game, I remember thinking, oh great, I've got to get footage from the Casino Night Zone pinball stage, don't I? That's so lame, I never enjoy this part. But I played through it, and I enjoyed it way more this time than I've ever enjoyed it before. It's crazy, but I really do love this game. The gameplay throughout, in my opinion, is brilliant. Classic Sonic may not be perfect, but it's plenty good in its own right. It's still a lot of fun to blast through those stages, and the modern Sonic stages are some of the best that I feel that Boost gameplay ever had. As for the graphics, for the most part, they've aged exceptionally well. I think back to the likes of Wind Waker, for instance, where, sure, if you look real close, you can see areas where maybe it's aged a little bit, but for the most part the game has aged exceptionally well. The character models in particular should be noted because they have aged stunningly well. Like, these still look amazing. In terms of graphics and performance, there was some weird hiccups on my PC. I'm actually beginning to think my PC might be too fast for Sonic Generations. During my time on Speed Highway, camera angle for classic Sonic seemed to get a bit weird at times, and there was a bit of pop-in here and there, but never too often for it to really ruin the experience. Now, this is a game that I've played on every platform that I could get my hands on. I've played it on Xbox 360, I've played it on PS3, I've played it on PC, and I've even got the 3DS version, though that'll be for another time. This is one of my favourite games of all time. It's fun to play, it looks great, the music, with so many great remixes, some that you can even unlock and put on the levels, classic versions of the music as well if you want the OG versions. There's so much to listen to in Sonic Generations. There were so many times where I'd play this game and I would just sit back and listen to the soundtrack, replace the levels music with one of the tracks that I just unlocked. It was a lot of fun. Without a doubt, Sonic Generations is one of my favourite Sonic games of all time, and without a doubt, one of my favourite games of all time. It's something that I keep coming back to every so often, and I still have so much fun with it, even after all this time. I always think I'm going to get tired of it, but it's just a fun, bite-sized experience. I beat it in like 3 hours nowadays, so it's not exactly an especially long title, so I'd recommend getting it on a sale if you do get it, or getting it second-hand if you want a console version. But overall, I can't recommend this game highly enough. Sonic Generations is a truly great experience, and I think any Sonic fan should give it a go.
Hey Sonic! Enjoy your future! It's gonna be great!
The Sonic games are actually pretty good. The internet's just mean. Poppy Playtime. Sometime I'm hoping to do a full review of this, when the entire game comes out. But I mean, I spent time playing 1 and 2. I might as well do a review of them. So, let's start off with Chapter 1. Now, Chapter 1 absolutely tries its best to build this, intrigue and horror, which, honestly, apart from, one major bit, I didn't really buy into. It's only when Huggy Wuggy themselves actually comes out do you actually feel any sense of foreboding stress, and that's because Huggy Wuggy at first comes out and is so much taller than you, and then, of course, the big vent chase sequence. They do a very good job at making this thing look dead set on ripping you apart with this animalistic bloodlust. This thing is very well animated. It does lose a little bit once you realise how scripted everything really is. It's not like Five Nights at Freddy's where everything's like this big hunt down to the death where you have to react quickly or die. This thing is very much, very much planned out. Now don't get me wrong, that doesn't ruin it or anything, but given that it ends up basically being over after that chase, it's a little disappointing. Right as the chapter is really starting to heat up, it's over. That's probably why they made the chapter free. It wasn't originally, and I remember there was a lot of anger when that happened, but, they clearly realized that while there is a scary moment there, they saved that scary moment till the very end, and it's quite short-lived, so I can at least respect them for making that chapter free. Now, Chapter 2, on the other hand, now they absolutely learned from their mistakes because this chapter had a lot more scary moments in it. Of course, you get the introduction to Mummy Longlegs, and let me tell you, Mummy Longlegs, while I don't find her scary, I do find the character far more interesting. The stretchy design, the way that the overly sweet way that she interacts whilst being clearly sinister with her intentions, it honestly makes for a very interesting character. I felt like more could have been done with her, much like I felt the same way with Huggy Wuggy, but at the same time, I don't mind not getting the full taste of her. Sometimes things are better being left up to interpretation and up to your imagination. And it doesn't matter that I didn't find her scary because there was plenty more to come. The first minigame was essentially Simon, but with Bunzo Bunny coming from above, and I love Bunzo Bunny too much to be scared of them, but I will say, obviously, there is an intimidation factor with something coming down ready to kill you as you're desperately looking for the button that you're meant to press. It's short-lived, though, and it's definitely the least scary part of the game. Then you get this other part where these mini Wuggies are coming through these pipes and you gotta look around to try and get them. And my god, I actually had to really crank the brightness up. Not because it was scary, although it did get me a bit, because there is this definite fear when I have stuff crawling up behind me in horror games that I cannot see. So, you're starting to really tickle me there, game. You're really starting to get at stuff that makes me uneasy. But it was because I actually couldn't see anything. Like, the default brightness made it so I genuinely couldn't tell where the Wuggies were coming from, so I would just keep losing. Once I cranked the brightness up, it was a lot easier to deal with. But still, even then, the tension as things continue to escalate, with the Wuggies coming up faster and faster, in greater quantities, until the end, it feels like you've just barely scraped by. Now, this is what I mean, the Huggy Wuggy chase in the first chapter felt a little too streamlined, whereas this, it feels like you're just barely scraping by when you get away from it. That is what I enjoy. This chapter seemed to really understand a lot more the idea of, just barely getting away from the monster. And then, of course, there's the one with PJ Pugapillar, where you have to move whenever the lights are out or whatever, and then the moment the lights are on, then suddenly you cannot move. And this one is intimidating in its own right, not as much as the Huggy Wuggies, but the fact that, you can sometimes get stuck on something and you're thinking, oh Jesus, PJ Pugapillar's probably right behind me, and, if you can't see PJ Pugapillar, you're worrying, where's PJ Pugapillar? And then if you see PJ Pugapillar, oh god, it's way too close. Again, this is another one which feels like you're barely getting by, and honestly, I love that because, it just, again, builds tension. The part with Mummy Longlegs, again, I didn't find as scary as the rest of it, but, again, the way that it's done, I do find very interesting. Seeing Mummy Longlegs coming at you all these different ways, at one point she even hides, it seems, to try and pounce on you. It's a much more interesting chase than the Huggy Wuggy one, even though it goes by a lot of the same rules. And I think that's because whereas the Huggy Wuggy one feels a lot more like you're just going around in a preset path, it feels like you have to be a bit more aware of your surroundings. You got to look up to use the grab pack, for instance. And of course, seeing Mummy Longlegs, change into this state where she is fully incensed, fully ready to just tear you to pieces, that's a much bigger improvement in my book. Now, of course, they leave the game on a cliffhanger where this metal clawed hand grabs Mummy Longlegs after you kill her, spoiler alert, and while I get that they're trying to build up suspense, my problem for me is, once you start building up suspense of this ultimate evil, my problem is, I'm gonna be building this up in my head. I'm gonna be so curious about what you're trying to build up to me, I'm gonna be disappointed. I'm gonna be honest with you, the big ultimate reveal is more than likely gonna disappoint me, because the problem with a lot of horror games is obviously horror is something that works a lot better if it's something that you cannot see. So right now, if all we can see is a clawed hand, my brain's conjuring up all kinds of horrifying shit. When they do the grand reveal, I don't know if they're going to be able to, live up to that. Still, I'm definitely curious to see the direction the series goes in. I know that Chapter 3 is still in the works at the time of recording, so while I hope to do a full review someday, I will say, while I'm not crazy hyped, like I mentioned there with my concerns for the big evil, I am at least curious to see the direction the series goes in. It seems that they learned a lot of lessons going from Chapter 1 to Chapter 2, so this might be a surprisingly compelling horror redemption arc. A lot of people pointed to this as the beginning of the end for horror games, but maybe there is still some promise here. Now, depending on the order that these VGCember reviews come out, you might remember me saying that Spider-Man for the PS1 is one of my favourite games of all time, because while maybe not the best mechanically, nostalgia-wise, I still absolutely adore the game. But Spider-Man for PS4, I think PS5 and PC is absolutely the Spider-Man game that mechanically ticks all the boxes for me. But before we get into that, let's just go over the story as quick as I possibly can, because it's a pretty nice story that tries to take itself as seriously as it can, while making sure that there's enough opportunities for you to encounter an amazingly large rogues gallery, which I absolutely love. Once again, it ticks all the right boxes by allowing me to meet and fight as many different enemies as I possibly can. After the initial encounter where you put the Kingpin away, you end up in a situation where you find out about Devil's Breath, this bioweapon that could lead to a mass pandemic, well, that certainly aged well, across the entire city, which could lead to hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths. And a whole lot of villains seem to want to get their hands on it. You end up meeting Shocker, who ends up revealing that they're working for someone else, that turning out to be Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative. And the part with Mr. Negative feels like a short game in its own. Like, once you beat Mr. Negative in, admittedly, not an amazing boss fight, you end up feeling like, wow, this was a crazy part. We must be like halfway through the game now. And it's, probably only the first third of the story. The second third kicks in where Otto Octavius ends up beginning to lose control of himself and becomes the evil Doc Ock and causes a prison breakout to happen where you end up fighting the Sinister Six with Vulture, Rhino, Electro, Scorpion, and of course, a rematch with Mr. Negative, and it's just a crazy time. Like, again, the game makes sure to make each fight feel varied. Every time you encounter the different villains, they do everything they can, and there's so much more that I could go into. There's the whole thing with Silver Sable, who gets called in to try and deal with this, who ends up fighting you as well because they deem you to be a threat. And the stuff with the Taskmaster on the sidelines. The fact that Otto turning into Doc Ock means that you end up fighting Otto at the end of the game, spoiler alert. It's all crazy. Like, there's so much that goes on in this game that I feel like at some point I'm gonna have to do a full-length review of this game someday, rather than just the short one I'm doing now. Not only that, but if you get the DLC on the PS4 version, or get the remastered version which comes with the DLC, then you get to fight even more people, like Hammerhead. You get to deal with Black Cats, you get to... It's just a great time, really. You get to deal with all of this crazy stuff. Like, this game has so much going on with it that it's hard to recall it all, because I could go on for ages about all the different things you can do in this game. Because that's the other thing as well, of course. On top of all the main stuff, there's the side stuff as well. There's this homeless guy who has his pigeons, and you've got to go and collect them all. You don't have to, of course, but doing that is just a good thing that Spider-Man would do. There's his backpacks that are all over the place. There's these little monuments you can take pictures of. There are these police towers that allow you to hook up the radio station to find more collectibles. And the thing is, it all feels so natural as it happens. You'll be swinging on through, you'll go up to another tower on your way to a mission, deal with that. Suddenly you'll see a backpack is not too far away, you grab the backpack, and now you're even closer to fighting Tombstone, who's another side mission. It all segues so seamlessly. Normally with an open world game, I feel like I really have to go out of my way a lot of the time, but I've 100%ed this game so many times because it just feels so natural to do it along with the rest of the game. There's a fast travel system, but let me tell you, the amount of times I've used that, I could count on one hand because it just feels so good to swing around with Spider-Man. And that's the thing, the gameplay is incredible as well. I was saying about how this mechanically is probably one of the best Spider-Man games, and that's another thing. Web swinging is so good. You get that sensation where the web swinging feels semi-realistic, kind of like in Spider-Man 2, but they've gamified it a bit more so that anyone can really use it, which is great. It just feels so natural, yet because of its simplicity, you're not having to overthink it. The combat is very modern game-ish, but the dodging mechanic with the Spidey sense feels great. Once you start unlocking more gadgets and you start upgrading yourself, you end up feeling like a major powerhouse. Suddenly you're taking out swarms of bad guys with ease like that. Like, this feels so fun to play New Game Plus with. And with the boss fights being all varied, you've got to get good at like several different aspects of using Spider-Man, so it really does feel like it tries to test your skills. Not in a majorly challenging way, I could beat the game on the hardest difficulty, but it can be a fun time. The DLC is a little bit more hit and miss with difficulty. Some of it's way too easy, and there's like one that's way too hard, like it's so much harder than the rest of the game and the rest of the DLC. I don't know what happened there, and they seem to course correct with the DLC that came afterwards. That's a bit of a mess, but the overall package is still incredibly strong. And speaking of strong, the graphics and presentation. The game's a few years old now, but it still looks gorgeous. I remember seeing the Tobey Maguire suit for the first time when I was playing it on PS4 back when the game was new, and I was blown away by just how good the suit looked. It looked like how I remember it looking in the movies, and I just couldn't believe that we were at the point now where I could genuinely think that with graphics. Sure, there might be better looking games nowadays, but dang, this still looks great in my opinion. The only part of the game that I'm not really too fond of is stuff like the stealth sections or the parts with Mary Jane and Miles Morales. They're not the worst because there is a bit of tension to trying to distract the guards and sneak past them, but I've never been crazy about stealth, and it ends up killing the pace, whereas I'd much rather just get in and just fight like a swarm of enemies and lay them to waste. But it's also such a small portion of the game that I'm not really too bothered by it. The game has so much going on that I just can't get enough of the game. Like, the only reason that I might have to take a break from playing the game for a couple of years is just because at this point, I've beaten the game so many times in the past few years that it's kind of got a bit ridiculous. Like, I think I'm finally starting to really finally scratch that itch with it. Which means now it's time for me to milk Miles Morales for all it's worth, and then eventually when I get a PS5 or when a PC release comes out, then I can start working on Spider-Man 2. But let me tell you, when I was finished with this game for the first time, I was desperate for Spider-Man 2 to come out, because I knew right away that there was something special about this. To me, this might be the greatest Spider-Man game to ever be made. I highly recommend that you give it a try for yourself. Amanda the Adventurer was a concept that I was intrigued by even back when I played the original free tape demo, so when I heard that they were releasing a full game, I just knew I had to play that immediately. So I was on this before it even became a viral hit. The game has what I'd say are two main gameplay loops, the main one being interacting with these videotapes you find throughout the game where it acts like a haunted Dora the Explorer episode, but unlike the original demo which was fairly linear in how it approached things, they've had the time to really expand on this concept. Such as when you get asked to name your favourite pie, Wooly can react in horror if you say lamb pie, or how you can just get wildly different reactions from Amanda to certain questions, leading to different outcomes. Or even, if you pause the tape at different points, you can get opportunities to do some things outside of the tape, which in some way interacts with the tape itself, such as with the oven in the kitchen. And this also helps you to work towards different endings for the game. That's another thing in Amanda the Adventurer. While the game I'd say is rather light on story, it seems to be laying more of a groundwork for a future sequel that's apparently coming out. It does have these little bits of story that it drip feeds you throughout the game, as well as multiple endings that you can work towards, each of which sends you on all kinds of different paths to obtain them. I will admit it can get annoying when you find out the answer for one route only for it to get locked off from you entirely, meaning that you need to remember it for the next playthrough. Which on one hand, the game is rather short, so replaying isn't so bad as it helps to give you more time to play the game, but man, do you get sick of seeing some of the same tapes over and over again as you try to figure out how to get the different endings. The puzzles themselves, I'd say for the most part, are fairly engaging. Sure, some of them had me racking my pea-brain to figure them out, but the game rarely oversteps in what it's asking of me. Honestly, I'm not sure if the sequel is one I want to stream. Let me know in the comment section if you'd like to see it, but it seems more like a game that I enjoy just figuring things out at my own pace. Sometimes things could get a little bit obscure, but a lot of the time, if I spent enough time thinking about it, I'm sure I could get to the conclusions of what the game wants from me. As for if the game was scary, not really. The game generally is good at creating a sense of uneasiness about it in certain moments, but I can't say I was ever outright scared of what happened in the game, even in the few attempts it did try to outright alarm me, which is fine. Not every horror game needs to have me deathly afraid to even play it. I think that's one problem that a lot of people seem to have, is everyone expects horror games to be 10 out of 10 horrifying all the time, when sometimes a game just needs to give you a sense of uneasiness while playing it. And honestly, I felt the game was actually weaker when it tried to outright scare me because it just couldn't quite do the job. Graphically, there isn't a whole lot to note here, as visually the game looks fine, and Wooly even has an improved model from the demo, but one thing does jump out to me, and that's Amanda herself still looks bad, and the problem I have with this is I can't tell if it's intentional or not. Part of me thinks that they're trying to capture that old 3D TV look, where a lot of things had that kind of awkwardness to it, but Amanda feels out of place even in her own show, which I'd understand someone might say it's because of her being narratively important and not making sense in the show, but Wooly seems to be narratively important as well, keeping Amanda somewhat calm. So the fact that he blends in a lot better, it just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, and I feel like they could have done more to help Amanda make sense in the game's visual style. Like how they managed to do so with the monster version of Amanda. Overall though, despite my criticisms of Amanda looking a bit weird, the game getting a little bit too repetitive at certain points, and yeah, some puzzles can be a little bit obscure, I don't think that that's enough to stop me from giving a general recommendation if you're interested. If you're still feeling uncertain though, from what I can tell they do have a demo. It is rather short though, but it should give you a general basis on if you want to try the game at all. For me, as a person who likes these types of experiences, like Welcome Home and other projects of a similar nature, this does scratch an itch that I quite enjoyed, and I'm definitely going to be looking to play this sequel when it comes out. If this game seems right for you, go check it out. WWE Smackdown vs. Raw 2008 might be one of my favourite wrestling games of all time. I'm not joking, like, for as hated as this game seems to be amongst fans of, like, wrestling games, I think it's one of the better ones. So much so that I've played every version of Smackdown vs. Raw 2008, and I'm going to quickly go through them all in this video. We're going to separate this into 3 categories. First, we've got the PS2, Wii, and PSP ones, which is like the last gen versions. Then there was the current / next gen versions with the 360 and the PS3 versions. Then you got the weird versions like the DS and the Java versions. Yes, they really did make this for Java phones back in the day. But which ones are good? Well, let's get into it. So the version that I used to play when I was younger was the PlayStation 2 version. And you got to understand, that's why I have such a fondness for this game, because if you're looking at this as a PlayStation 2 game, it's pretty bloody excellent. The graphics are pretty good for a PlayStation 2 wrestling game. The roster, of course, is pretty much identical on all of the games, except I think there is a few differences here and there. But otherwise it plays pretty much the same and has all the features that you'd expect from the next gen version as well, which makes it an absolute classic game for me on the PlayStation 2. I sunk so many hours on this game. I mean, just look at all the different match types that you can do in this game. Like, there was lots of selection for the time. And one great other thing that I really enjoyed about the PlayStation 2 version that actually made it kind of hard when I first went back to play Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 is the control scheme feels so natural to me. The way that the dual analog sticks are used in order to have fluid, fast, arcadey style gameplay, like, I just took to it immediately. To the point where if I play Smackdown vs. Raw 2007, the controls feel like a weird halfway point to the Smackdown games and Smackdown vs. Raw 2008. I'd rather have one or the other, and so 2008 is a very nice, comfortable control scheme for me. So what's the Wii version like then, seeing as we're talking about controls? Terrible, I hate it. The Wii version controls awfully because it uses motion controls, and the Wiimote and nunchuck just don't feel right when playing a wrestling game. But at least if it was like fully button and analog stick controlled, I'd have something to work with. But when I have to wiggle the Wiimote, it just feels weird. And I don't feel like I'm in control of the wrestlers. Not only that, but they stripped down the amount of matches. It's got the least amount of matches out of any of the home console versions. It's got even less than the PSP version. That's right, we're leaving the Wii version in the dust. I hate it. But the PSP version, I'm actually really impressed by. Keeping in mind that this is on a tiny little handheld, it actually plays pretty nice. Like, it's no doubt the roughest looking one when it comes to actually replicating the main game, but like, given that it's on the PSP, I was just blown away by how well it manages to port everything over. I was expecting far bigger compromises than this. Like, this might be one of the better portable wrestling experiences that's ever come out. Like, it's crazy to think that the PSP can beat the Switch for portable wrestling gameplay, but there we are. So that's the first set. The PS2 version, lovely. It's like a good baseline version. That's probably like the standard to achieve for this here. Then you got the Wii version, which absolutely flops, just completely falls on its face, is absolutely terrible. And then you've got the PSP version, which despite being a handheld, actually holds up pretty darn well. So then we move on to the next gen versions, the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions. And what do I think of them? Oh my god, they are so much better. Like, I constantly forget about how much nicer these versions look until I play the PS2 version and then switch to that HD versions with those better looking models, and I'm like, dang. Like it ends up looking how like my child brain imagined these games looking. Now I will say, on one little detraction to the PS3 version, I swear it's running more slowly. Like, here it is next to the 360 version. I don't know for certain, but every time I play it, it does feel slower, so I end up defaulting to the 360 version if I want that definitive SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 experience. Which, by the way, spoiler alert, the 360 version, ding 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 ding, that's the gold medal. That is the gold standard for what SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 should be. The PS3 is okay, but it's slow. But the fact that it feels slow kind of docks some points for me, but it's still a fairly solid version.
Now it's time for the weird ones. Now, I had to make some compromises with this one. I own the DS version, but unfortunately I don't have a capture card, so what you're seeing is emulated footage, and I promise you I'm not as bad at the game as the footage will have you feel, but it's so weird trying to do touchscreen controls with a mouse. Either way, it's still a terrible way of playing SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, because the matches are just QuickTime events. Like, why? Why would you ever want to do that? It's like, there's not much more to say, really. I mean, just look at it. It's terrible. Hate it. It's easily, like, the worst version of the game overall. Then you've got the mobile Java version, which unfortunately is just running way too quickly on this emulator. I tried to slow it down, but this is the best that I could get. And honestly, if I had this on my Nokia back in the day, I would have been fine with that. Like, yeah, it's bad. Let's not kid ourselves. It's bad. But the fact that it lets you create your own custom character with, like, some basic, like, PS1 SmackDown levels of editing could be worse, I guess. Like, this is a situation where I don't think they could have done much better given the format they were on. So I'll give them a pass, but it's still a pretty bad version. Right, so I spent all this time comparing the different versions, but what do I actually think of the game? Like I said, it's great. It's honestly one of my favourite wrestling games. Like, you've got Here Comes the Pain, you've got 2K19, you've got a whole host of others that I'll get to eventually, but the point is, this is up there as one of those games that I just really enjoy when it comes to WWE's wrestling games. The gameplay is fun, there's a 24/7 mode, which it can be a little bit laborious at times, but if I want to take the time to just spend a whole afternoon like on a longer mode, then some of the stuff that happens does tend to keep me somewhat amused. It's not the best though compared to other modes, like Here Comes the Pain's one is still the best like story mode I think I've ever played in a wrestling game personally. Creating a wrestler and creating a championship, while definitely limited nowadays, like you can't even have a beard that really sticks out from what I found, and picking colours is a nightmare in Create a Wrestler. Having it all come together is still definitely fun, and with a little bit of legwork, you can get most of the wrestlers that you'd like come together. So, while definitely not near as good as what is around nowadays, I can still work with it and have a decent enough time. And as a kid, I loved creating custom championships. It was just a load of fun being able to just create your own special title. Also, before we end the review, a little life hack. If you want to get a bunch of cash right out of the gate in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, start up 24/7 mode, go right the way down to WrestleMania on the calendar, and then just let it simulate from there. You will rack up money like it's nobody's business. With that, you can buy all the stuff you need in the WWE shop, because one thing that you definitely need to do if you're going to make a custom wrestler is buy like the special things that bump the stats up, because for some reason the game lets you only do it that way, and I've got to say that is one thing that I hate in this game. Why would you do that and take away the customization? It was so stupid. I'm glad that they eventually changed their minds and brought back being able to just customize the stats manually. But yeah, overall, while maybe it'll be a lower entry in my top favourite wrestling games of all time, it's still a game that I have such a soft spot for, so much nostalgia for, and one that I will still load up every so often. I still prefer other games like Here Comes the Pain and whatnot, but SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 tends to get an unfair rep in my opinion, as I think it's an underrated wrestling classic. If you can find the PS2, Xbox 360, PS3 or PSP version, I'd recommend trying it out.
The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog was a surprise-free game that Sega released this year, and as a massive Sonic fan, you knew I just had to play it. Throughout the game, you play as Original the character as part of a train crew doing a murder mystery experience for a birthday party, it being Amy's birthday. Obviously, the game makes it clear right away that despite the title, Sonic isn't actually dead, as funny as that concept might be. You know, I kind of understand why they had to make that clear immediately. Saying that, Sonic does actually get hurt, as it turns out to be that Robotnik has taken over the train, with the train actually being a badnik, which, wow, that's actually, kind of interesting. We'll get back to that though. Now, throughout the game, you have to go clicking around the scene to find little clues here and there before you go to make your interrogation. Then when you go to click on the appropriate piece of evidence to back up your claims, you're taken to this little mini-game where you must collect enough rings to make the argument stick. Kind of like the little bonus stages that Sonic games used to have back in the day. You do that, and you win the argument. It might not fully scratch the itch of people hoping to have picked out the best dialogue choices, but for a free Sonic game, I feel it's a fun little addition to keep things interesting and keep it with that little Sonic flavour, rather than being just a free visual novel that just so happens to have Sonic characters in. There's a series of smaller mysteries throughout the game. You end up finding out that Shadow's elusiveness is because he's actually trying to secretly order tickets for Amy for a little surprise gift. And those are fun, if a bit easy, but saying that, the overall mystery of who actually took out Sonic was fun to speculate on, as I actually didn't know who did it. Then with the twist at the end of Robotnik showing up having taken over the train, I did not see this coming and I absolutely adored this. But as I said, the mini-game where you have to collect enough rings to solidify your argument is a definite fun part of the game. Not only does it help to keep that Sonic flavour going so it doesn't just feel like a generic visual novel, it of course can be quite fun. There are some moments throughout the game where I did seem to struggle a little bit with the controls, but never enough to say it's bad or anything, because if I ever lost, all I ever wanted to do was just try again. So any frustration is automatically cancelled out just because it was a fun little time killer. And I also loved the pixel art that the game went for this little mini game bit, again trying to capture that kind of retro aesthetic. I couldn't pinpoint it to any specific part of Sonic's history, like they meant the little handheld's called the Dream Gear, like a little reference to the Dreamcast and the Game Gear. However, I'd say that graphically, it reminds me more of that Sonic game on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. Okay, I'll stop nerding out and I'll get back to the review. It's clear the writing team had a lot of fun doing this, and just overall, I loved the writing and story in this game. The writers seem to have a lot of fun with this. With the amount of jokes and banter the characters have, the game is full with fun little interactions. Tails especially is a highlight. With him by your side, he always said something that I found funny. Even if it wasn't always intentional, he was just a really great part of the experience. And the insert character is so empty-handed, it also lent to its own humour and charm. Along with many little jokes the game peppers up throughout here and there, such as Amy Rose apparently listening to a true crime podcast.
Her arms were cut off. Her legs were cut off. Her ears were cut off. Her tongue was cut off. Her nose was cut off. Her eyeballs were plucked out. Her eyebrows were then waxed. Her tongue was sliced open. Her hair was cut off.
Honestly, that alone is worthy enough of a recommendation because the game's free and you get all this fun little writing in it. I just really enjoyed this. Visually as well, the game is so pretty. The Sonic characters generally can look really nice in 2D renders, and these are exceptional ones in my opinion. And I absolutely love the outfits everyone has in this game. Amy Rose's dress is so cute, Sonic is the dorkiest he's ever looked, Tails as a detective is so adorable, SPO is so gender, and to be honest, they need to make Knuckles' outfit just part of his regular design. It just works in my opinion. The different areas are also very good at looking distinct in their own way, making each part of the game easy to remember. Overall, for a free game, It's clear that they went out of their way to give a fun experience instead of just cheaping out. Of course, there are more substantial experiences out there that develop on the concepts that this game dabbles in, but for a free game, it's really not a bad use of your time if you enjoy Sonic like I do. So go ahead, go onto Steam and download it. I think it's still available. Donut County is silly, random, and doesn't take itself that seriously, if at all, and I find it a lot of fun. The story follows how BK destroyed the town with this hole he got, with BK coming up with every excuse in the book as to why he's not so bad, all in the quest to get this quadcopter, before finally having to accept that he messed up big time and going to deal with the heart of the problem, the Trash King, who caused this whole mess to begin with. Let me tell you, this game has no misconceptions on what it is. If there's a serious moment in it, I certainly can't remember. The characters often have text conversations with each other, and even when talking to each other, they don't seem to talk that much differently than when they were on the phone. And plus, even when texting, you have this little quack option to just post a duck emoji, which really just sums up how little this game takes itself seriously. Now, throughout the game, you end up in different levels, all themed around the main mechanic, which has you controlling a hole to take in everything you can, which increases in size with each successful object taken. It's kind of like the mobile games you see with the ever-growing hole, except this has some genuine thought put into it, as each level will give you a little puzzle to figure out. They aren't head scratchers in any particular way, but they do keep each level fun and interesting as you figure out what the game was going for, and helps keep each level unique in their own way. Such as one level where you absorb snakes and then use them to wreak havoc, increasing the snake danger level all the way until the meter breaks, or a restaurant level where you have to take some soup and, while avoiding the cockroaches, season it with salt and pepper to give to a bird to slurp up, which if you give it too early, then they'll spit it back out because you didn't season it well enough. Or a cliffside that you have to take down by lighting a firework, absorbing said firework, and then firing it at it 3 times, causing it and the people on top to fall. There's even a boss fight at the end when dealing with the Trash King. And of course, when you're done with the main gimmicks, it's fun to watch as the hole absorbs entire buildings. It gives the sight that you typically see in those mobile game adverts while actually having a little bit of fun gameplay rather than just being a mindless trek to absorb as much as humanly possible. Though, to an extent, when I played it, I did wish it had a separate time attack mode kinda like those mobile games, as the game is rather short, and because there wasn't anything else to do when I tried it out, I didn't find any replay value in it, which, yeah, did make me wish for a time attack mode where I could just absorb as much as I could, get the hole as big as I could in the time that I had. I don't know, just something that I could guarantee that I would be coming back for more, because I really enjoyed the mechanic and felt it was gone way too soon, as I finished the game in about an hour and a half. But even without that, this is still a fun experience that, even with that, I might still go back to anyway, just so I can experience it all over again. If those mobile game ads ever give me the itch to play a game like this, I'm going to ignore those ad-laden messes and load up Donut County again. If you can get it in a sale, I'd highly recommend it to anyone who's interested, because it's a fun, eccentric game that I think it just makes for a good, bite-sized experience. I recently played KinitoPET, the latest horror game that's been going around the internet like crazy, and a game that gets a bit meta, that starts breaking that fourth wall, can often intrigue me. I've seen the likes of Undertale, Doki Doki Literature Club, I'm Scared, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, and so many more do this concept, and I've always found it so enjoyable just to see how the games attempt to mess with you. Now, KinitoPET is definitely less of an objective-based game per se, it's more of just an interactive experience, which I do feel is worth mentioning. KinitoPET essentially is acting as a Bonzi Buddy type of program, which will appear on your desktop, and as time goes on, you watch as KinitoPET just completely wreaks havoc on your computer. And honestly, I really enjoyed the ways that KinitoPET does this. At first, I definitely felt a little disappointed when I saw the big, goofy icons appear, I mean, don't get me wrong, I did get some nostalgic memories of those Newgrounds Windows simulators where all the jokes were just, oh, you clicked on a program, blue screen. But I did feel like the game was putting up a barrier, like this is where the scares will happen. You do not need to worry, you don't have to get too scared, KinitoPET will stay right here. But it's the moment when these barriers started getting actually broken that the game really started to work for me. Like, the game was showing me a few scares like, oh look, this old Flash game is starting to get really fucked up. And then suddenly the game told me to look at my other monitor, and oh my god, the squid is looking at me from the other monitor. I had barely caught it in time because I was just so surprised by it. In that moment, the game had successfully shattered the safety that I'd felt with the barrier. Now, I wouldn't say the game was that scary, but it left me hooked, wondering what KinitoPET was going to do next. Another part that I loved was actually again to do with the monitors, as KinitoPET later on in the game says that they want to do something, but they want to leave it a surprise, so they're going to turn off my monitors. And let me tell you, I was floored when my monitors actually turned off. I didn't even know games could do this, and yet KinitoPET's doing it like it's nothing. I didn't have to scramble to figure out how to get my monitors back on. Turns out you just move your mouse like you would if you left your computer on too long to hop right back into it, but still, I love the times the game actually caught me off guard. And there was the time where I was filling out the form, and when I filled in the email address, it actually sent an email to my real inbox, which, again, the way that this game tries to blur the lines is so cool. When it works, it really works. Another part that threw me off was when I first discovered this little secret area that you kind of need to get to if you want the final ending. And after quitting out of the game after I was completely confused as to what I was doing, I got there way too early to figure out what I was doing, I then restarted the game and was greeted with this. And let me tell you, that was probably one of the moments that actually spooked me the most, because again, I just did not see it coming. I really wish actually that I had gone into KinitoPET completely blind, but again, that's not KinitoPET's fault. Unfortunately, the internet makes seeing spoilers sometimes just borderline unavoidable. It's why I put a spoiler warning at the beginning of this video, because, quite frankly, I want as many people as possible to just be able to enjoy this game without getting this spoiled for them, because it makes the experience so much better if the game can actually catch you off guard. There were definitely moments where it didn't quite achieve the results it was hoping for. Like, unfortunately, the stuff about, like, oh, you didn't fill in your information correctly was something that I was already aware of, so when KinitoPET started trying to look up my location, it didn't really affect me the same way, but I can't blame the game for that. It's unfortunately one of the problems when something just gets so popular online, it becomes borderline impossible to avoid getting spoiled somewhat. The other bit of fourth wall breakery that really didn't work was when the game tried to access my webcam, because, well, you see, I don't have a webcam. Well, not one connected to my computer anyhow. The only time I ever had one was back during the Zoom days when I needed one for work meetings. And now it firmly sits buried at some dark corner of my room, never to be seen again. So when KinitoPET was getting all, oh, I'm gonna see your face, oh, it ended up pulling up my capture card, which I know, pulling up an Xbox is scary given that I've been a PlayStation fanboy my whole life. But it doesn't quite have the same effect as if it had actually pulled up my real face. The game's also tried to bring up my real name a few times, which, oh no, my real name. Sonic.exe games have done that to me already. I don't need you to try and do this, KinitoPET. Still, those moments where KinitoPET does hit in those fourth wall breaking moments, such as having you pull up command prompt to continue the game, it's honestly so well executed. And even stuff like finding out my location, while it didn't scare me, I could still see how it would absolutely throw someone off who wasn't expecting it. And like I said, there were times the game legitimately threw me off, and I adored it for that. Now, the game does have other scares, which I find to be far less enthralling, such as the game doing the hide-and-seek bit where suddenly I'm in a 3D game, or if it asks me if I'm afraid of the dark and has me sitting in my bed like it's Five Nights at Freddy's waiting for the KinitoPET jump scare, and I just find this to be not great. Like, I've got a million games that I could go to that can give me this kind of experience. KinitoPET is definitely at its strongest when it's actively fucking with you in ways that feel real. Actually, for a good comparison, there's a moment that KinitoPET does essentially twice, and it doesn't work in one instance, but actually works surprisingly well in another. KinitoPET at one point in the game will actually pull up your friends list and kill them all off, but given that it's a custom window I've never seen before, it has no real emotional weight. Like, oh no, I'm solely sure you've killed them all. Oh, that's so scary, KinitoPET. Like, it doesn't have the same effect as pulling up command prompt, because I know that's not a real window. I know that's something that KinitoPET has come up with. But then when the game has a similar segment where it pulls up 2 of your Steam friends earlier in the game and asks you which one you would kill, and then does a fairly convincing screen break effect, that's a lot better in execution. If memory recalls correctly, the game has 3 different endings. One where you choose to stay with KinitoPET forever, one where you choose to try and break away from KinitoPET, which just leads to the same outcome of staying with KinitoPET forever essentially, and the one where you actually end up deleting KinitoPET, which does require a little bit of thinking to actually figure out. And there's actually some good use as well, as you actually have to go into your app data folder to try and find the encrypted folders and whatnot. It's actually really clever in how everything is done, with you then unencrypting the folders, and then using command prompt one more time to delete KinitoPET once and for all. And with that, KinitoPET ends on one of its great strengths. And I haven't even mentioned some of the other cool things that the game does. Even without breaking the 4th wall, the game does several things which I find to be quite enjoyable, really. For instance, the game has a good memory about things. If the game asks you something or asks you to draw something, it will keep that in mind. I remember the game asking me what my superpower was or what my favourite food was, and asked me to draw pictures of myself and KinitoPET. And then later, it created a 3D world that seemed to be attempting to be some sort of paradise, and it just remembered everything, and honestly was a very enjoyable moment, just because I was like, oh wow, that's what this was all building to. And then walking to a room and suddenly, oh look, it's the room I decorated at the beginning of the game. Oh look, it's a doghouse of Branson Pickle, the dolphin that I came up with earlier. It's small touches, sure, but it's all these small touches that overall make the game just an endearing experience. Like, I've gone on about the parts that I found were quite underwhelming, but the game overall is such a tight package that I found it overall a very positive experience, and one that I think many people should try once. But, and this is the big but, the game is rather short. I finished the game, got all but one of the achievements because fuck Minesweeper, and I got a total playtime of 2.5 hours. Now, I'm not the type of person that thinks every game needs to be this type of experience that you play for months on end and continue playing until the end of time. Some people are going to be expecting a little bit more out of their experience, and might be a bit shocked when the game ends as early as it does. It definitely surprised me, at least. Now, I still think the game was absolutely worth the price, as a short experience, the game is really well done overall. I didn't even cover everything the game does, because it's actually kind of impressive how much it tries to cram into such a short span of time. The game really doesn't try to pad itself out, and really does try to put everything it's got into making your experience as exciting as possible. So, should you check KinitoPET out? Well, I mean, if you've watched this review, then there's a good chance that most of what I've said has kind of spoiled the magic for you, but still, yeah, I honestly recommend it. If this game even vaguely interests you, this is definitely one to check out. With an experimental game like this, I find when it works, it's truly something special. And honestly, I think it's an experience that so many more people should try out. Absolutely check it out if you're interested, and enjoy everlasting fun with KinitoPET.